It should be yes. Okay. Jeff Swearingen? Patrick Updike? Sandra Black? Marty Smith? Tom Lampy? John Benson? Bob Von Wolfrat?
Present on the phone.
Denise Pavlik? Andy Buffington?
Here.
Ellen Hagan?
Here.
David Ness?
Here.
Jason Leonard?
Present.
Rob Rotter?
Here.
Mike Casper?
Here.
Carol Lund Smith?
Here.
Larry Smith?
Present on the phone.
We have quorum.
Okay, thank you. If you do a introduction of board members, starting with Andy.
Andy Buffington with Winnebago and Hancock County Emergency Management Communications, representing communication centers.
Ellen Hagan, Jewel Fire and Rescue, representing volunteer firefighters.
Dave Ness, Des Moines Police.
Carol Lund Smith, Iowa Law Enforcement Academy.
Jason Leonard, Waverly Police Department.
Tom Lampy, DPS.
Chris Myers on the SWIC.
Patrick Updike, Iowa Department of Corrections.
Sandra Black, Iowa Department of Transportation.
Marty Smith, Iowa Department of Public Health.
Mike Casper, Lynn County Sheriff's Office.
Rob Rotter, Iowa County Sheriff.
John Benson, Department of Homeland Security Emergency Management.
Anybody on the phone? Larry? Larry Smith?
Larry Smith, Emergency Management.
Are there any other board members on the phone?
Bob Von Wolfrat, State CIO.
Anyone else? Thank you. Welcome. Looking for the approval of today's agenda. If you could get a motion for that, please. Any? Have a second? Second, Ellen. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Need the approval of the meeting minutes from September 13th meeting, 2018. If you get a motion for that, please.
So moved, Casper.
Have a second?
Rotter, second.
Larry Smith.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. SWIC report.
Thank you, Chair Lampy. A little bit of housekeeping really quickly. We do have another TIA, TR8, P25 steering committee meeting next week. That is coming up very, very quickly, obviously, since it is next week. It's not too late. If you have any concerns regarding standards or feature sets that you want to bring up that you think would be good to have in that suite of standards, I will certainly relay that to the appropriate entities. And a continuation of that, there is an encryption subcommittee white paper along with a letter to the P25 user needs group that's up for approval today. This is the work product of that group over the past several months that outlines needs from Iowa with regards to what encrypted interoperability could look like, why it would be beneficial to have set up in the standards in such a way that it's more manageable and easier to deploy. And basically, it's something that would help us within Iowa and potentially everybody else that uses P25 technology around the nation. That paper was sent out last week. I know it's not exactly a light read, but we do have three key takeaways that will be outlined and be up for debate, hopefully next week at those meetings. The goal of that is to kind of also add those suggestions to the P25 Statement of Requirements document. That's kind of a guiding document for manufacturers and customers and consultants to kind of look at and say, these are the feature sets that might be beneficial for everybody to have. So the hope there is that if we can get that into the SOR and get those work projects started, that it's more likely that things will be incorporated into product. So that's a pretty heavy lift, but it's received some very positive feedback from some stakeholders that I've shown it to. I actually have a phone call later on today with the P25 User Needs Subcommittee, assuming that that gets approved today to kind of discuss presentations and things like that. Some other projects recently of mine, a lot of work recently was devoted to working with the various subcommittees to help get some trainings set up with regards to ICS 300 and some logistics for our incident tactical dispatching class. I assisted Chair Pavlik with that. And then also the PSAP, a control station grant that we'll be able to talk about later on during this meeting, and of course the talk group nomenclature and other projects associated with FirstNet and public safety broadband. This does include reviewing some after action reports from some large events, and one thing that I've also been working on is trying to figure out if there's any information we can glean from those that we can take back to Iowa stakeholders, whether it's a large or small event like a university football game or a relatively small localized county fair. I think there's some information that we can take from those reports and some best practices as well that are going to be somewhat scalable and possibly universally applicable. So I've also had some more conversations with our neighboring states recently regarding interstate interoperability. I'll be participating in a meeting on October 25th up in Albert Lee with Minnesota and some counties up there. I've been in conversation as well with my analog in Missouri, and we're starting some discussions as well with Wisconsin and Illinois, Nebraska, and South Dakota relatively soon as well. That's the bulk of my report, Chair Lampe. I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Okay, you're off the hook.
Thank you.
For now. Huh? For now, yes. 911 report, Blake?
Good morning, Board. Just a few things from the 911 program. At this point, 22 PSAPs have signed up for the shared services. That's up 2 from last month when I reported. We have identified the next 3 PSAPs that will actually be getting turned up. If you remember, Hancock County was the first up, the guinea pig. The next 3 identified are Jefferson County, Poweshiek, and Mahaska in some order, not necessarily that order. And then finally, I mentioned this last month as well. We will be having a program update webinar on October 25th. The bulk of that webinar will be a joint presentation with Department of Management on local 911 budgeting. Our office receives those local 911 budgets as well as Department of Management, and there's just a few things we need to tighten up. Just get kind of the word out and make sure the budgeting folks are also involved in that webinar. The bulk of it, again, will be directed kind of towards them. Any questions?
The DOM's putting that webinar on?
We're putting it on, but John Parker from Department of Management will be co-hosting it with me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the UGC, Chair Buffington.
I'll be deferring to Swick Myers as the morning that we decided to have the UGC call. Instead, I decided to evacuate my comm center in Garner, so that seemed to take up a bulk of my time. So with that, and thank you to Swickmeyer for taking that over for us and running the meeting. So I'll defer to him.
Thank you, Chair Buffington. We basically discussed user applications from several entities, Carroll County, Crawford County, and Tipton Ambulance Service as Level 2, Jackson County EMA, Johnson County Joint Emergency Communications Center, Department of Homeland Security, Office of Emergency Communication, Jim Lundstedt, and Buchanan County, Level 1 for interop, and then Mills County also for Level 4. Those applications were discussed. They were all approved by the UGC and moved up to the board for full approval and signed up to the system. So.
Okay. You good? Is that it, Andy? Okay. Moving on to finance, Chair Hagan, if you give us a report, please.
Monthly net expenditures during September for the Interoperable and Broadband Communication Fund were $14,643. The September ending balance was $250,704. Monthly expenditures during September for the SLICP 2.0 were $5,779. Of that amount, $4,623 were federal expenditures. The remaining federal amount available from the grant is $106,028. Does the board or anyone else have any more questions?
Any questions? Thank you.
Okay. Might I give my outreach?
Sure.
Same thing. We're sending out what we get, and if you want to get the emails that we send out, let me know, and I will put you on the group list. Thanks.
Thank you. Governance.
Briefest report ever. We met, people attended, there were 2 standards put forward. Any questions? Thank you.
Yeah, I have one.
Fire away.
You're going to ask for approval for the change in the nomenclature. Is that yours or Jason?
Mine.
Okay.
Unless John would like to do that, I mean, that'd be fine, but.
If you need me to, I'll walk away.
Okay. Hey, we'll move on to operations then. Right over to you, Jason.
Right, kind of like Andy, it's been kind of a rough month, so I'm going to defer a little bit to Chris here for the heavy lift. I mean, he was on the call. I bounced off of the call, as well as the Friday's call as well. So unless, Marty, would you like to give it to me?
No,
Give it for me?
I don't have any notes with that.
So the operations committee met, just like the governance committee. It was well attended. We did discuss a couple of things. Following last month's board meeting, the operations committee was granted authority to kind of set up that grant program to help PSAPs get connectivity to Isicsb for interoperability through control stations. They met and discussed the process and had a lot of good thoughts and feedback and questions, and eventually we kind of settled on the process, doing it through a Google form, tracking the responses, having the responses being written to Google Sheets spreadsheet so that we can record everything and kind of maintain details such as when the application came in, who did it, preference of manufacturer if there is any, and all that is recorded. And at the end, DPS will probably make a lump sum purchase of all the equipment, and then the control stations will be delivered to the PSAPs pre-programmed with some antenna and coax to help get things set up. The goal is to more or less have it be a plug-and-play solution where once it's delivered, they could fire up the control station and transmit and receive on the network for interoperability. It is intended to provide basic connectivity to the system for interoperability. If the PSAPs want to go further with it and incorporate it into the console, they can, but there's not any funding available to help facilitate that. This aligns well with the goal of providing a control station to PSAPs that don't already have access to the system. With regards to manufacturer preference, if there is any, we're going to make a reasonable effort to accommodate that if we can. But of course, we still have to follow DAS procurement rules. We have to follow grant guidelines. There's a whole host of guidance that we have to follow along with this so that as we execute it, we comply with basically everybody's rules. And there's probably 3 or 4 sets of rules we have to comply with. The control stations, one of the grant requirements is that they're tagged and inventoried, and DPS will be taking care of that as well. And then there's going to be some radio testing down the line as well to verify, just to make sure that everything's functioning properly, and then that also ensures that we are compliant with the grant rules. So that was all released on Tuesday. There's about a 30-day period for people to apply to make a statement of what they want, and then we'll put all that data together and go from there with the order and then eventual deployment of those. The second thing that was discussed was nomenclature of interoperable talk groups for the regions. If you looked at our fleet map, all of the talk groups started with the same 2 digits. They all started with IA to denote Iowa. Well, some of the feedback that was submitted to the standards working group was that nomenclature can get relatively confusing, because if you look at that and think Iowa or IA, you think that could be a statewide talk group. And through some debates at times lengthy, it was decided that it might be more effective for the end user base to denote that the regional talk groups start with an R and then have a number that designates the region. There was some concern that, well, we already sort of do that with the number at the end, the two-digit number, whether it's call 11 or call 21, call 31, that designation of regional functionality is already in there. But the thing that we got from other states was it's good to have some level of designation in multiple spots just in case people start referring to the talk groups in shorthand. You don't necessarily want to have something like R6, TAC 6, because eventually people are just going to start calling it TAC 6 if they're used to just working within Region 6. And then if they go to, say, Region 2, they'll say, well, I'm going to go to TAC 6, and they'll go to the wrong one. So the numbers at the end of the talk groups are going to remain the same. The only thing that's changing is taking the regionals and making it start with an R and then the number for the region. The statewide will be untouched. And if that's approved today, we're going to get all the stakeholders that information as quickly as we can so that changes can be made. I fully expect that there'll be some cheat sheets that have to be generated to help end users avoid confusion. I talked to Minnesota about that as well, and they said, well, cheat sheets are the norm here. So I don't think we're doing anything out of line with that as well. So more or less, that's what the Operations Committee has been working on.
I have a question. The consulates, you said they're going to be tagged and inventoried. Obviously, they'll be property of DPS. Is there a time period, or are they always going to be property of DPS, or is there a time period through the grant guidance where they would be able to be turned over to local ownership? I know in some of the HSGP grants in the past, some larger equipment has been able to be turned over to that local, assuming it's depreciated enough.
That's not something that was discussed, but I think I know the guy that has the answer. He's sitting in the back. Blake, is that a yes or a no about transfer of ownership eventually to the locals from DPS?
Yeah, I believe so, but I'll get you the exact time frame after this.
I'm assuming it has something to do with the period after grant closeout.
My preference would be to turn it over to,
Understand?
it's one less piece of equipment that's on my.
Thank you.
Chris, we talked about it as well, and I saw the results and stuff. You said it was just released on Tuesday. Back to the grant processes and the people that have been applying. What has been the feedback on that so far? I saw that what you'd sent out already, but just to kind of let everybody else know.
Yep, and I guess I forgot to mention too that we've had 10 applications come in already, and it's only been out since Tuesday, so that's positive. The feedback so far has been more questions than anything. Specifically, what model numbers would be covered. So we have some documentation from vendors that would be providing that equipment. So I've been providing the model numbers to them as they ask. Some of them have had some more technical questions about antenna arrays that they may need or something like that. But for the most part, the questions have been purely information gathering, and the feedback has been pretty positive.
Can you remind me of the amount and roughly how many we'd be able to provide or help with? I understand that it may not be identical amount for every PSAP.
Yep. So the grant has a net value of $450,000 that we have at our disposal. And the goal is to try to get a control station in every PSAP. So we're going to do what we can to make that happen. I think one of the stipulations of the grant requirement from the FEMA side of it is that we have to make sure that by the time all the money is spent, that we meet that goal. So we're going to do what we can to make that happen. Each PSAP would get one. It's designed for basic connectivity. I know personally, I would love to provide them with 2 to 5, depending on the size of the PSAP. Candidly, I've been playing the Powerball the past several weeks, but I've had zero luck hitting the jackpot. Otherwise, I would have been willing to help self-fund that, but the goal is to get one in every PSAP that would need it.
The 30 days seems like it may be an obstacle, and I understand why it's necessary to make the initial wave, but is it under consideration that if money remains available, that perhaps a second opportunity for agencies that weren't able to respond quickly enough may be able to participate?
I think they're going to get a control station regardless of whether they're able to fill the form out in time or not. The form is especially there to make sure that we can get the MOA from them, but the language is in there that if they don't select one, we're going to provide one for them. So more or less, they're going to get one no matter what they end up choosing as far as timelines go. As far as if there's any funds remaining, that's a discussion that we'll have to have with Homeland Security. I know that topic has been slightly casually broached, but we need to wait to see how things shake out first. So,
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Is Sean available?
Thank you, Chair and Board. So recently, we've been working on the website. We had some things to get it up to compliance with the OCIO standards, so we've been doing some back-end stuff with that. We've been doing some things to enhance our newsletter, including we will now put in a link to the 911 Council's meeting as well, so that anyone who receives our newsletter is also receiving the link to the 911 Council meeting if they want to go out and watch it on YouTube. We've been doing enhancements on the Isicsb join site. We had a couple issues with the API with Google. We're resolving those, as well as to automate the creation of the folder so that Andy and the user group committee can start accessing these folders when someone starts to join. That's in active testing right now. Beyond that, that's pretty much what we have going on. We're still working to plan and get the logistics straightened up with the next RIC outreach. As you know, we had to reschedule the RIC 5 outreach. Currently, we're looking back to Burlington or Ottumwa. I'm obviously open to suggestions, but I need to make sure that we have a packed room and that people show up. So I've been working actively with Motorola and AT&T to make sure that we get the logistics figured out in that. And of course, with all the holidays and with whatever weather starts coming this way, and with the Department of Public Safety with all their trainings, I'm just trying to play the logistics game with all the staff. So that's been kind of very interesting lately. And then, of course, we have Mason City, which we're looking at tentatively sometime in December for that RIC outreach. So we're working aggressively, but we have to make sure that everything is in place and that people will be there to show up, both from our standpoint to give the presentation as well as the people to show up to receive the presentation. Other than that, any questions?
John, can we add the participation plan to the join process?
That is part of what the updates are that we're doing right now actively on our test site. That is actually on the test site. We have not rolled it to production yet. The reason why we have not rolled it production is because we wanted to make sure that we could test it as an active through process with the Google Drive creation, so that we could test the whole new join process, because the new join process will have the participation plan. You will not be able to do the join process unless you can do your MOA, your LOI, and your participation plan. In the past, it was just the LOI and the MOA. Now, all three are required in order for you to do the join process. That way, there's no disconnect. That way, there's no constant follow-up to get that participation plan. We can do all that in the beginning. A sample one, it will be created and put out there. Links just the same as we did for the LOI and MOA. Everything will be the same. It's just one more step. It'll look just like the LOI or the MOA. It's just you can't proceed further. You can download all of them on the first page just like you did before. You can access all of them the same way just like you did before, but you can't do the join unless you come to the join with all three products ready to go to upload.
Okay.
And then all of them will be put in that folder that we talked about with the UGC, so that we have one way to do this, one directory, one format. So every time a new join happens, it will create the folder, and all three files will be placed in that folder automatically. And then we're hoping to send off a notification as well to the team email as well as the UGC. So that you'll be notified that the join, you'll still get the same join email that you get now that says, hey, this person joined, here are the attachments. You're still gonna get that. And now you'll get it, you'll also know that the folder will be created. Yes, sir.
And if I may say too, as we go through the application process and assisting users with jumping onto the system, the thing that delays applications tends to be the time frame in which documents roll in, and usually that participation plan is the last one to get. So trying to take care of that a little bit sooner may help expedite the process for some of our agencies that want to join.
Any questions? All right, thank you.
Chair Pavlik, do you happen to be on the phone? He covered for everybody today.
I am.
All right.
That's why I got some water before this thing started. I
Move
knew
on
I'd be
to
doing a lot of talking.
training.
Okay, in the absence of Chair Pavlik, she sent me a written update. The first thing on the list is we have an ICS 300 course in October, or we had one. We had 16 in attendance out of a potential 20 positions, and the class went very well. We have another ICS 300 course that is OEC delivered. Again, that's a little bit of a deviation from the norm, but it's helping us tremendously in helping people knock down some of those prereqs that they would need to get their COML. That next course takes place on November 14th through the 16th in Mason City. As of now, we have 8 registered students. The final date to register is October 31st, and we need 2 more students to register for this class to continue. My hope is that we do get those because it'd be nice to potentially have an option to have another 26 COML student candidates. I think that'd be very beneficial for us long term. The Incident Tactical Dispatcher course, which was scheduled for late October, was moved to November 26th to the 29th in Monticello due to some enrollment issues and instructor conflicts. At this time, we have 9 registered students, and we need at least 1 more for the course to continue. The deadline for registration for that is November 12th. As a means to ensure that we have that class, we have opened it up regionally to neighboring states if they want to send someone to register as well. That way we're basically assured that we're going to have enough people attend to host the class, because that Incident Tactical Dispatcher class is very, very helpful from what I've been told. The regional Isicsb training classes were pretty well attended. Chair Pavlik believes there's a lot of good information regarding what Isicsb is, the functionality, and how to join the system. She did speak with some training committee and several other attendees and got some feedback from them. Some of the comments included that the feeling was good, but it may be a little bit of a shortcoming as far as actually helping them go through this is how to patch this or do that type scenarios. That's a little bit difficult to accommodate since everybody uses different dispatch consoles, and trying to come up with a how-to for that would be relatively difficult.
I don't think that was the intent of the class in the first place. Was it a hands-on how to do this?
No, wait.
Left up as a.
Yeah. So there were also some questions raised regarding whether or not the state will be providing some sort of status board so that agencies will know when a talk group is being utilized or not, other than just having to listen to it for a bit. And there were also some questions regarding whether or not the state was going to have trainers go into the dispatch centers and actually train the dispatchers. And then there was also some questions regarding the use of alert tones. Would they be allowed? And if so, would there be a standard use policy? And how will everyone know what each alert tone means in case there's several of them? Finally, there are some questions about interconnectivity with other states and how that will be accomplished for those that border other states. Overall, Chair Pavlik, she said that those that she talked to thought it was a very good overview of the system of what it can do. There's still some thoughts that there's more needs for training specific to the dispatchers and how to work the system. That is the end of her report, and if there's questions, I can try to answer them, but for the most part, those will probably have to be directed towards Chair Pavlik.
So I will comment on the one on the need for training. Under 8029, we're required to provide some training. When we've achieved our ultimate objective, which is getting the system here, now the training starts to kick in, which we really didn't. We paid for it in the past, but we really didn't have a system to train on, so I think this falls nicely into that. However, we are going to have to ask for some additional funding for that because the budget that we have would not last very long. So I think for our budget request, we need to get together with finance and operations and have a committee call on exactly how much we need for that to fulfill our requirements under which says we shall do these things, not think about it under 8029. So just something to think about. We'd be happy to provide that. That's what we're trying to get done here. Okay. Move on to technology.
Should I just give this to Chris?
You might as well.
The Technology Committee met on the 27th September. We did not meet on the, I believe, the 2nd of October because I had some other work to do. But one of the things that we discussed was the encryption white paper that's going to be addressed in agenda item 19D. So that was a pretty short discussion. I think the intent was to make sure that everything was kosher with the technology group so that it could be pushed onto the agenda for today. I had some questions for the technology group with as it pertains to the use of some of the interoperability channels because the Department of Corrections has a list of those channels programs. So the discussion there was, when is it an appropriate time to use an interoperability channel when you're talking about 9 facilities across the state? You know, can I talk to another facility on an interoperability channel, even though we're all of the same agency? And even though that just addresses the Department of Corrections, I think that sometime in the future, you're probably going to see more of that question come up. So that was our other topic. And then finally, we spent quite a bit of time discussing the potential for metropolitan interoperability sub-regional talk groups. So that's pretty much really what it amounted to, is just talking right now and trying to figure out how that could potentially move forward or whatever. And that's all I have for today's report. Thanks.
So the facility, you're wondering if it's proper to talk on the region, like a statewide or a regional facility? Oh, excuse me. Facility to facility? Is that what the topic was?
Yeah, we have cell extraction teams that migrate from one location to another. So, you know, is it appropriate for them to use one of the analog channels? If I'm going from Clarinda, I'm from Clarinda, and I go to Anamosa, can I use those channels to communicate with their CERT team, cell extraction team members, even though we're of the same agency but from a different facility?
But it's for operational use, just for your day-to-day stuff for training.
Right, wouldn't be for that.
Okay, just wanted to get clear.
Yeah, and I think it's still kind of sketchy,
Okay.
but you know, we can dig into it more.
How would you operate it now, Patrick?
How would I do it now?
How would they do it now?
They don't know. That's what they want me to find out. I mean, you know, you can take your talk around, because we're running both analog and digital. And, you know, they all have frequencies at those locations that they can use for talk around channels. But if the technicians aren't programming those particular channels in, if they aren't going to put the talk around channels in, but they're going to put the interoperability channels in, then the question becomes, well, why can't we use this? And my question is, well, why didn't you program that in? Well, because I don't want to do that. You know, I don't want to program a license frequency that I have already, but I put the interoperability channels in. And so you're fighting some of those issues about which channel you should use.
Are you talking the national interop or the Isicsb interop?
The like the UCall, UTAC channels. Yeah.
Okay. Because when I went to Fort Madison a couple weeks ago, you have 8TAC 91D in your council at the dispatch. What do you recall that?
Right. They should have them all.
Yeah.
They should have all of the ICS 217A frequencies in those consoles.
As well as their regional, for their region Isicsb, right?
Whatever their capabilities are as far as UHF, VHF, 700, 800, they should have all of those in. Now, we don't have any UHF base stations, but we do have UHF handhelds. So.
Okay. All right. Is that it? Okay, we'll move on to other reports. Information sharing among board members. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share with the board? I'm going to embarrass Holly. Where's she at?
I think she's in the booth.
Holly, you can step out here. I told her I would. Holly's our new secretary, or AA2 for the board. She replaces Ethan, and she's getting up to speed. This is her 4th day, so we're getting her ramped up here. Drinking from a fire hose, pretty much. Okay. You bet. You have a chance to visit with her afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
You bet. Okay, we'll move on to the Motorola Project Manager Isicsb update. Melvin.
Good morning. Let's hook up here real quick.
Chris. Show it to everybody.
All right, can you guys see the screen? Is that a yes?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so this is the condensed versions as I started doing last time because of where we are in the project. So again, the blue dots are the sites that we've been keeping track of. And this is where we are today. There's been more movement. You can see up in the upper piece up here, that site, which was a lease site, we have power now. We also have power to one of our IPTV sites here. That's the KTIN Fort Dodge site. And we're currently working on power to the remaining sites. The good news is Craig Allen is back now, and he's working with us to resolve the power situation, and that's kick-started pretty quickly. So we expect the rest of the lease sites to have power by the end of next week. All right. So again, the sites of interest here are the Calhoun site, which is ongoing in Hardin. The remaining were just the lease sites. And the IPTV, the Keosauqua site down the bottom, which you need to resolve the power situation to as well. And then the Rock Racket sites. Hardin was one of the difficult ones, challenging ones here that we've been showing as active for quite a while. Last time I showed you pictures that the tower was actually done. It's probably hard to see from this photo now, but we've done the foundations over here and over here for the generator, the LP tank, and the shelter, and that's going to be delivered today. So if everything works well with the power company, we should be able to get that site up and running pretty quickly. That site is kind of critical because it sort of connects a lot of things, and it will interconnect the region 2, which is right now isolated because we don't have a connection back into the loop. So in summary, we basically down to one site that hasn't started, which is a Rock Rapids site, and then the 2 active sites, which are the Calhoun, which is a lease site, and the Hardin site, which we expect that to be done. By the time we meet together next time, it's going to be done. Calhoun is moving quickly too. We're starting the process of doing the shelter and the generator while the mod stuff is being permitted. And then the last piece is, which we show here has not started, being the Rock Rapids site. So we come up with a plan to actually start doing all the flat work. And we have one final hurdle to jump to make a decision which way we're going to go with that tower. That tower is complicated because we have to consider, just like when we do things, when we started this process with sites and shelters with DOT, that we had to consider their operations. But with IPTV, we have to consider their operations as well, right? So it gets pretty complicated. either way. So we're trying to figure out the best way to do that. And, but I think we have a lot more clarity right now, so we should be making a decision pretty soon. Last time we talked about the coverage testing that was taking place. We had started with Guthrie and Jasper County, and then we had the remaining 3 there that were in progress. That was last time. As of today, this is where we stand today. So we have about a third of the state covered. All the orange counties are the ones that are in progress right now. And the next target, once we get done with those, will be the remaining blue ones up here in this, which is mainly Region 2.
How many teams do you have on that?
It kind of goes up and down, but on average, 8 teams. Right now, we're experiencing a 99.6% success rate in all the testing that we've done to date. So I have some information. It's not quite the latest and greatest one, but I do have one that I wanted to show you. So we have this large map, and we're showing the counties that we tested. This is a sample back a couple of weeks ago. So what I want to do is I'm going to zoom in so give you an idea of how this works. You can see all the little squares represent the tiles. So every green dot represents a sample in that county. As you can see in Crawford County, we got 1 red dot. In Monona, we have more dots, but these dots are actually expected. This is where there's a river that goes by, and we actually show them as not painted because we expected that to not be covered at the rate that we're expecting. Look at Shelby. Every single tile that was tested passed. Audubon, Carroll had just 1. Again, if we zoom in, you can see that there's a little white area there. So that was to be expected. So when we're done, we're going to have this entire map covered. It takes a lot of work to put these together. So my engineer has been in jury duty. So I kind of missed him, but he'll be back next week and I should be able to update these maps again.
Is this straight from the program?
No, the program generates all the raw data, and then he has to import all the raw data into this stuff to be able to show it where it goes.
So when it's red, you assume that's covered with a signal?
No, what the red dot basically means that it didn't meet the bit error rate of 2.4. Doesn't mean that it's not usable. As a matter of fact, part of the plan is to go back later and do a DAQ on it, which basically we go to the red dot and say, can you hear me now? So we confirm if you heard it or not.
On all of the red dots?
I'm sorry?
On all of the red dots?
On all the red dots, yeah. Even though the pass-fail criteria is the bit error rate, so even if you could hear the conversation, it still failed from a statistical perspective because that's a requirement. But we still go back and do the DAQ so that we can comply with the requirement.
The DAQ of 3?
The DAQ of 3.4.
I thought you said 2. I must have misheard.
And that stands for delivered audio quality, and it is literally, can you hear me now? How do I sound? Yes, you sound good. No, you don't sound good.
Okay.
Excuse me, just to verify, because originally you said 2.4. It is 3.4, not 2.4, correct?
Bit error rate and DAQ
For
are two
pass
different
fail.
things. Yeah, so the bit error rate is one value. The DAQ is a 3.4.
The DAQ is 3.4, but the
Yes.
bit error rate's 2.4.
Yes.
Okay.
So a delivered audio quality of 3.4 equates to a bit error rate of 2.4 for TDMA. So again, a lot of interesting if you look at all this, and again, we'll be able to provide this as a huge file that you'll be able to print, plot in the big thing so that you can see all the green dots and all the red dots.
They've been dodging tornadoes too?
What's that?
Have they been dodging tornadoes too?
Well, we've had a lot of challenges. Guys have been getting stuck. The cars get pretty filthy. We've had we had the magnetic signs attached to the vehicles. We've had to actually put some more like tape and stuff to hold it because there's a lot of rain and wind and flood areas as well. So it's been quite a challenge. All right. All right, so again, we continue to build. What happened here? This is supposed to be 2, so we have actually 2 active builds and 1 to start. The microwave path alignments, that's just going to continue for a while. The DPS dispatch training that was completed, that was a significant event. That means that the DPS dispatch centers were actually able to use the equipment that's going to be used when they go operational on the system. And that included DPS dispatch training, but it also included radio training as well. We did this training in 3 different locations in Storm Lake, actually 4 different locations, Storm Lake, JFHQ, Cedar Rapids, and Cedar Falls. So now the focus is preparing for the switchover. So what that means is that we have equipment that's in parallel with the equipment that's being used today. Part of this preparation for the training was to parallel the existing conventional equipment so that the dispatchers could still use the new equipment that's accessing the old equipment. So this DPS dispatch cutover is really all about going into a dispatch center and pulling out the old equipment one at a time and then putting in the new computers. So instead of having them, because right now what we did is we placed them all in conference rooms at the dispatch centers. It is connected to the backroom equipment. So now we're actually going to put it at the dispatch room on each operator position. So it's more disruptive, so we got to do it one at a time. We're scheduling to do that starting on October the 22nd. All right, so we continue to re-optimize the 700 megahertz. We are pretty close to the end. And what came up last time was we had an issue with the state of Illinois. So we've gone back and forth on how to resolve that. So we came with a resolution. And the resolution is, if you look at this map here, it was 2 specific sites, the Muscatine and the Scott County site. The green circles represent what's called the regulatory contour. We're trying to keep that within 3 miles of the state border. So what we're doing is we're changing the antennas there to have directional antennas that point away from the edge of the state. Doing that resolves 40 dB mu, which is a regulatory contour that was giving Illinois some heartache. And with that, they would accept all the other sites without a problem. So we have the antennas in stock, and we're going to move forward with reconfiguring those, which is good because this entire area we actually haven't tested for coverage yet.
So there will be no spillover at all then in that one?
There's no spillover for that signal level, which is the 40 dB mu, but there is still use of the system outside. But what happens is that the level of reliability starts dropping.
So is it okay if I elaborate on that? So you see the outside pink areas, those are both contours of a 25 and a 5 contour for portables and mobiles. And 40 is where that's the mileage around your base stations that it's transmitting out on. And it is a RPC requirement not to go over 3 miles past your border areas. They did a good job at doing the antenna. That's what I suggest. That's what I would have suggested. Directional gain, really good. I just didn't know if you knew that.
That's good information. I know we've been struggling trying to
Right.
get this resolved.
So it allows your portables, mobiles to go beyond that 3-mile border and still have some strength.
That's
But
good.
yeah, that's good.
Super. All right.
I think that's all I have.
Okay.
Any questions?
I don't.
Okay.
I think our AT&T rep is pulling in the parking lot, but Jim, you can go ahead and come on up.
Good morning, Chair Lampy. Just a couple of topics for you. I will not repeat the OECTA that we're closing out for FY18 that was covered in Swick-Meyer's report. We're happy to get the ICS 300 and INTD in this year and look forward to future opportunities. The OEC Technical Assistance Catalog will be released on October 15th. There will be a couple of new offerings, and we look forward to working with the SWICs, and I invited the 911 committee program or the 911 program manager to collaborate with the SWIC if there's something that we can assist with. We had a 2-day SWIC meeting in Kansas City this week. All 4 of the SWICs were able to attend either in person or by teleconference. Pretty successful, some good information shared. Particular note, the encryption policy document and interstate interoperability discussion. Very pleased with Iowa's input, and those were of use to the other states. Feedback very positive. Of interest for future planning, Missouri reported on a 4 corners communications exercise that will be conducted in southwest Missouri in September of 2019. And although that sounds like quite a distance and quite a ways off, we already have commitments from the states of Arkansas, Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. Upwards of 250 participants are anticipated. This is an opportunity to test not only conventional and trunked systems. We're going to have sites on wheels from Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, including Missouri's new trailer-mounted 700 megahertz site, as well as a FirstNet, one of the new FirstNet deployable trucks to play with to give telecommunicators as well as technicians and ComEls some functional experience. We're really looking forward to that as a chance to test drive it before we need it in an emergency, and think there will be some good information come out of that and some best practice. Very brief FirstNet update, and I've been updating the SWICs on this. I decided I'd play crash test dummy. I'm now a FirstNet customer with the band class 14 capable device, and the intent here was to not only see how the vetting works as an individual user that wants to join, but also to test some of the apps that we have developed, and indeed found one of the apps that does not play well with the core. Working with AT&T on that now. It's related to dialing, so it's not the traditional stuff you would think of, but it's a concern. Last thing I'd bring up, would be remiss if I didn't remind everybody it's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. The theme is always based on Stop, Think, Connect. And as I reported at the 911 Council meeting, there have been 3 cyber incidents that affected PSAPs in the region in the last 90 days. Those are always embarrassing. Let's be honest. It's embarrassing, but one particular entity decided they did not want to report the incident to the FBI or to DHS. The problem with that is we will eventually find out, because this is something that has to be remediated, and it gets into regulatory reporting because that community has other touch points that do end up getting reported. The key is We can only solve these problems when we can identify the threat and the attack surface that was used. Oftentimes we find it's email, but it could be an app or some other imported connection. The existing Fusion Center process, as well as the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center, collaborate to try to identify these things. We're stronger when we work together to avoid these things happening to you. If it happened to your neighbor and we can figure out how and why, Fusion is what works. But if we keep it to ourselves in the interest that we don't want to be embarrassed, we don't become more resilient. So the message is stop, think, connect. And when it does happen, we learn from our mistakes. Any questions for me? Thank you, sir.
Ann? Go with the norm today.
Yeah. Again, that's why I grabbed some water before the meeting today. I knew I'd be doing some talking and sucking all the oxygen out of the room. We did have a modified standards meeting on September 18th. The goal and purpose of that meeting was to look at what we've done collectively as a standards group and kind of figure out what the direction is for the next 3 or 4 meetings. We have a list of standards from other states that we were kind of looking over and figuring out, does this apply to us? And if it doesn't, we just left it. And if it does potentially apply to it, is it important that we do now? Or is there some sort of characteristic that we can't quite account for yet that we need to define before we do something with that standard? After a meeting, it lasted about an hour or so, we kind of figured out what we need to do going forward. We'll end up with some standards that other states don't have yet. I know from the standards working group, we're looking at that travel one that we want to get done. We've got some other things from other states that are well-defined and necessary. But we also may start branching into, you know, how is this going to look in theory when we have something like WAVE or Public Safety Broadband that wants to interact with our system. So we're going to start having some of those discussions as well. Our next meeting is in 2 weeks, I think. And they're going to be moving towards monthly meetings as well, since the hypercritical ones are done. And a lot of the stuff that we're doing now is basically, I don't want to call it icing on the cake, but they're not necessarily as vital as some of the previous standards that they've done. So in all, I think we'll have a full suite of standards ranging from high priority to low priority within the next few months. Board approval.
Nice. We've come a long ways with those. Lots of work done.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that contributed to that as well, both present and past members of that working group. And all the thanks and credit goes out to them.
Yeah. Okay, Dustin. We got your map, I think, being prepared here for you. You can go ahead. Till we get that going.
Time that right. Well, first of all, the map in front of you is our progress year to date for FirstNet opt-in.
You don't quite have it.
Don't have it yet.
You don't have it?
There we go.
Okay. That's the map that we have so far. These dots do not represent specific cities, but coverage areas. So that gives you an idea there. These dots are not necessarily specific locations, which means we could have multiple locations in that area. Could have one, could have two. All the dots indicate LTE improvements, but they're not frequency specific. So, meaning they may or may not have band 14. I know in the FirstNet portal, I know there was a few folks that have access to that. I know you have it. That has that granular, that's in there in the portal. So, having said that, all these sites offer FirstNet service, every single site. So, and I don't think I was here, 2 months ago? So I don't think we have anything new on here unless the only one I didn't remember is the one at the bottom there by the Missouri border, down there by the Lamoni. So I think that one could be relatively new. So.
The end of the day, over 200 sites, additional sites.
Well, there's
But that's the total?
Yeah, I mean, as far as either upgrades to existing sites or brand
Right.
new ones being built,
Right.
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And I've talked to Andy he's our RAN network engineer based out of Minneapolis. Either this November meeting or, do you have a meeting in December too? Okay. Hopefully get you a little bit more granular map. Some of that stuff we can't, if it's in the FirstNet portal, it's not necessarily open to the general public, but we'll get you whatever we can get.
Is AT&T available for public safety today as well as for personal use?
Yes. So if you go into a AT&T store and if you're a first responder, they can sell you, they can offer services to you because you're a first responder for your personal phone at a
So you
discount
have
rate.
to obviously show identification, and so you go into the AT&T store.
Yep.
And do that.
Yeah. So all the stores in Iowa are open and available for that. And
Can you? There's data packages and phone packages and just
Yes.
data, just phone, unlimited, no throttling.
Correct.
Has AT&T identified all the sites that you're working on or purchasing or improving within the state of Iowa?
I mean, that's an ongoing,
Right.
the build-out plan for FirstNet's 5 years.
So you haven't identified all the sites yet, as these 200 sites that you're talking about?
At least on the eastern side, I think most of those have been identified and they're working on those. But that'll be an ongoing process because I know I was talking to, where's Chris? Yeah, I was talking to Chris yesterday. I think we have a site in Carroll that we want to go on. I'm not sure that the city wants us to go on, so we're working through issues like that. So I mean, like if that falls through, then we have to find another site.
Sure.
So. Go ahead.
Yeah, Dustin, we had a call for some vertical assets from people recently, and I've sent you several sites. Has any use been made of those sites from some relays? I know they have to fit into the channel plan and coverage map plan, but has any of those local sites been of use so far to FirstNet?
Not yet, but keep sending them to me because I know you sent one. I think it was it rural, either Marshalltown or Tama?
Yep.
Andy looked at it. It just didn't fit what we were trying to get done. But obviously, we would like. I mean, it's cheaper to do that way if we can co-locate rather than get a new site built. So,
when we did the first outreach and we touched every county, what, 3 years ago now, almost, we passed out before the meeting, like who you are, who you represent, and then one of those questions was, would you be willing to provide infrastructure for FirstNet? I can get you those numbers, and all those that responded yes may help you.
Okay, and I do think, I mean, when we went through that FirstNet process, because I know as vendors, when AT&T had to submit a bid, a lot of that information was in the Iowa FirstNet portal.
Okay. Every asset in the state.
Yeah, I think that was part of the Iowa job was actually, okay, hey, look, this is all our infrastructure that we own. We're going to put that in the portal so all the vendors who are bidding on it could actually look at that, look at their network and say, okay, look, if we're going to bid on FirstNet, each state, we know what each state has that we could co-locate on.
But I'm talking about the local sheriff's office that said, yeah, you could use our site.
Okay.
But the city, whoever was in that room offered that up, so you really drill down into, I know you had the portal and you had everything available, but this is more, you can really probably make some progress if you have a hole to fill somewhere with somebody that offered.
If you have that, I'll take it and I will give that to our RAN network folks and send it up the chain.
I just thought of that.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
Thanks.
You bet. Thanks.
Okay, we'll move on to new business, which is the new Isicsb user approval. Back to Chair Buffington.
All right, thank you, Chair Lampy. The User Group Committee has considered and voted to approve the following for access: Jackson County Emergency Management Level 1, Johnson County Joint Emergency Communications Level 1, DHS OEC Level 1, Buchanan Level 1, update Carroll County to a Level 2, Crawford Level 2, Tipton Ambulance Service Level 2, and then Mills County Level 4. With that, I would make a motion for the board to approve those as presented.
We have a motion on the floor for Carroll County update to level 2, Crawford level 2, Tipton ambulance level 2, Jackson EMA level 1, Johnson County Joint Emergency Communications Center level 1, DHS OEC Jim Lundstedt level 1, Buchanan level 1, and Mills level 4. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Ness is second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. We are on to the new Isicsb standards approval. Governance Chair Benson.
As I mentioned, the governance committee brought forward 2 standards. First one, use of 700, 800 megahertz scene of action channels. And the second being computer-aided dispatch and air traffic information access connectivity. Had a brief discussion on them in the committee, made some amendments to them, but decided to bring them forward and as you see them presented. So as the chair, I would move to approve the use of 700, 800 megahertz scene of action channel standards and also approve the computer-aided dispatch and air traffic information access connectivity standard.
Okay, motion by John Benson for the use of the 700-800 scene of action channels, computer-aided dispatch and air traffic information access connectivity. Do I have a second?
Casper, second.
Casper, second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Revisions to nomenclature of regional interoperability talk groups, Vice Chair Leonard.
Okay, would you like to put that up on the overhead, Chris? As Chris had reported out during the operations committee, talking about the nomenclature change on some of these regional talk groups. And I'll get it put up. I know that this had been provided to everybody else in their packet of information. I just want to make sure that it was actually put out as well to anybody that might be viewing it. So, other way.
Wrong way.
Obviously on the top, you can see the current talk groups as they've been. The bottom is the proposed changes. The only thing that we're talking about is just the nomenclature part with the replacing the IA in front of the, say in Region 1, Iowa Call 11 with Region 1 Call 11. You can see the grids set up that way. After talking about it within our operations committee, after being passed it from the other committees as well as have taken a look at this, it was basically been talked about amongst the operations committee to move forward with this, to change the nomenclature from the current to the proposed. So with that being said, that's my moving to propose these, or to accept these proposed revisions to the current talk groups.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the nomenclature change for regional interoperability talk groups as seen on the screen. Do we have a second?
Second.
John Benson. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Go ahead.
What are the other states doing that have trunk systems and interoperability regional talk groups?
Just use this. It kind of runs the gamut. We have tried to take everything that we found from those other states that we found to be useful and maintain some level of consistency with the way we do our talk group naming with the best practices from other states, and then also what is kind of accepted practice within things like nomenclature of the non-federal interop channels. So the things that came to us from other states was make sure they all have a unique number. That maintains consistency with kind of the formatting of the NIFOG, so that's why we have the 2-digit numbers at the end of every regional talk group, call 11, TAC 22, TAC 36. The thing that we discovered from other states was if you don't do that, you'll end up with people using shorthand when they start referencing those talk groups. So suddenly you may have a guy from Region 5 going into Region 2, and he's always known that TAC 5 is right here on his radio, but if he goes into a different region to assist with something, that TAC 5 is vastly different unless that number is at the end. The other thing that they will do sometimes is other states will sometimes designate by discipline. some will not. We got more feedback saying don't designate by discipline if you can avoid it. So these are still kind of general use purpose. And then some of the other things too was they do have some regional designation to them. We just happen to have 2 in this case to kind of add a level of redundancy just in case nomenclature shorthand changes amongst the user base. So we've kind of taken a little bit from Ohio, a little bit from Minnesota, a little bit from the NIFOG, and kind of rolled it all into here.
You gonna share these with Missouri and Nebraska and?
Of course. Nebraska and Missouri users are more than welcome to sign up for level 1 interoperability or any other use.
What if they name theirs the same way you did?
I don't think we've encountered that yet.
What if you do?
Minnesota's, what if we do?
Yeah.
Well.
Okay, so I'm Deputy John Doe. I'm out there and I'm Atchison County, Missouri, and I'm gonna go to Fremont County. I've already got an R1, or in this case, R4 call 41. But what if Missouri Atchison County has that same naming convention? He's gonna go, where am I at?
Yeah.
I don't know which one I'm using.
I see what you're saying.
Are the regions in Missouri on the bottom half the same as ours?
Well, yeah, I know where you're going, and I'm just saying, is it the potential for that to happen?
Well, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, anything can happen, but
There's potential for everything, but as far as the end user base goes, if they're far enough into Iowa where they would have to change to our system, they're gonna have to change the zone in their radio anyways to affiliate with a different system. So that problem, although common nomenclature or duplicate nomenclature across state borders may actually happen, operationally, I don't know if that's necessarily something that is likely to be an issue because they're gonna have to change zones on the radio anyway to affiliate with our system. I'll use and also, they'll know right away if it's not going to work because those surrounding state systems are in different frequency bands. You mentioned Nebraska and Missouri, those are primarily VHF systems.
I kind of like the Iowa part of it because it identifies it as Iowa. And these people, she's showing me documentation, Northwest Missouri,
That was Minnesota. No, in Missouri, they've got their own nomenclature.
Okay.
So it's not similar to ours.
Okay, so it is.
So E Fire 1, E Fire 2, Region E for East Fires. And they've got it down like E Swap 1, things like that. So they've did theirs just a little bit different. CIO for Region C interrupts. So they've got their down just a little bit different from Missouri. Minnesota, same thing. They've got different ones for Missouri. So we're pretty safe as far as those. I haven't checked them all.
Yeah.
I've just been doing it briefly,
Okay.
but I think we're pretty safe as far as them not duplicating or replicating our own, at least for those 2 states that I've checked real quick.
Super. How do I know which state I'm in? By looking at that.
Well, if you wanted to get onto those systems, you would still have to change to that zone. And
Well, I'm just saying, based on that there that she's showing me,
yeah,
and what you're proposing, I don't know what state I'm in.
it says Iowa calling 1 on the left. Well,
that's for the statewide
calls do
the
not
regionals
change.
are different.
No, I'm talking regional.
Right.
This is Dave. I'd like to offer a comment.
Yes.
I appreciate that we started out with IA and you've talked to a number of different states and users and you came back with this feedback. I think it's important to recognize what others are doing around, but I think the primary focus needs to be on our everyday users. And I think this will simplify for our everyday users. The other will work itself out, but we can't either be paralyzed or make it too difficult for the everyday user. For the occasional or the chance that it may interfere with another state, in my opinion.
And I was just thinking aloud too, some of the other states, a lot of Minnesota, for example, has S tax for state tax. There's no designation of Minnesota in any of their names either. I don't think, from what Sandra Black found, I don't think there's any designation of any state in those names so far, is there?
I think the confusion up on the first one, it confuses our own users more than the bottom one, which is important. It goes along with what you said.
You mean the top one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Me too. Yeah. I think the new designation is much more clear.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Up to the public comment. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. 19D. Move on to the approval submission of encryption white paper to P25 user. Who's taking care of that? Patrick or Chris?
It came up through the technology. Yeah.
Should have known.
Yeah. So what's up for approval right now is basically the board's blessing to submit the paper to the P25 User Needs Subcommittee for discussion. And that discussion will hopefully eventually lead to standards project to develop our suggestions into standards, and then also to add our suggestions that this would greatly enhance interoperability from a technical standpoint, and to add it to the P25 Statement of Requirements, which is like this guiding global document for everything P25 as far as what users can expect for functionality. So along with that white paper will be a letter that outlines what we've done and what's in the paper, and an official request, more or less, for them to undertake this project. With the board's blessing and permission, I would take all this down to the TR8 and a P25 UNS meeting in San Antonio and present these there, and then we'll see what happens. So, but since it's coming from the board, the thought was that it does need to have endorsement of the board.
Well, how does this benefit Iowa?
How this will benefit Iowa is long-term. If we get into a scenario where we want to do interoperability over encryption, it will effectively streamline management practices. Right now, if you have a radio, you can only talk to the encryption key server on one system. So if you're in an area where you migrate from system to system, like we may have in parts of this state or with some of our federal users or out-of-state users, that presents a problem if they want to have updated encryption material. Some of our suggestions would entail them being able to migrate to a different system, affiliate with that different system, and then grab the encryption key material from that system over the air without them having to physically touch the radio or take it to a radio shop like they do now. From another perspective, it would allow the encryption key servers from different networks to communicate with each other more effectively. We're making that suggestion as well. And then in theory, you could have networks from, say, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, all communicating and sharing encryption key material so that there'd be another way to distribute that key. And then there's another request there for over the internet and over the Ethernet keying to happen. And what that would effectively do is it would make management of encryption material on something like dispatch consoles a lot easier. Right now, you more or less, unless there's some sort of special sauce incorporated into the suite of software, you have to physically touch each console every time you update the encryption key. And for larger networks with a lot of console positions, that can be a problem. This would allow for a pathway to do that remotely over the internet from a key management server. Basically, what it would do is it would make the management a lot easier for us from the Isicsb board as far as how we decide when do we update keys. There are some states that have rolled out encryption, but they have never updated the key because they are afraid of the management nightmare, and this would take care of that, more or less.
Okay.
Chair, I've got a question or comment on this. Chris, you're getting into the weeds a little bit on things we identified through the encryption committee. It seems to me this is sharing a high-level overview of what the committee found, including identification of issues and concerns that we're wanting others to learn from our experience, and also wanting the others to help find a solution. But we're not proposing to enter an agreement or making a recommendation for a policy change at this point. It's just sharing what we've learned. Is that summed up? I would endorse or make a motion to that effect.
Okay. We have a motion by Dave Ness. Do we have a second? Second. Sandy? Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. On to public comment. I think Blake is coming up to give us an update on the equipment transfer, I believe, for the PSAP.
Yeah, just a quick update on that question that was asked about how long DPS would have to maintain that in their inventory. It's 3 years after the close of the grant, so it's a 3-year grant plus 3 years. And then the equipment value, fair market value, has to be under $5,000. Then it can get transitioned.
Okay.
Yep, Chris.
So one quick question, that's fair market value, right? Not purchase price?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Motion to adjourn? Buffington, second. Patrick, all in favor? We're adjourned.
3 years after, so what it was?
Yeah.